Hello everyone, this is Anas Badran and my oral report on the Human Rights Report card that I made on the state of Israel. I decided to give Israel a D letter grade, really because of them being responsible for the human rights violations and issues in the Palestinian territories, which in these territories Israel hold authority over. So to start off with some historical background and context, and how Israel really came to be. Before World War One, there were lots of Jews coming into Palestine, not in too large groups, but they came in and they coexisted with the Palestinian people, and they showed no sort of hostility towards each other. But it was really after World War One when more and more Jews started coming in because Britain occupied Palestine and placed it under its mandate, and the Zionist movement soon became established and started growing. And with this British backing, more and more Jews were willing to come into Palestine, uh, allowing for more Jews to come in. But Palestinians also had this growing fear of eventually a Jewish state being established, and so that increased hostility and any tension. And eventually, after World War II and the Holocaust and the atrocities that were committed on the Jewish people, uh, lots of there were lots of refugees and Jews seeking asylum in Britain and other European countries. So these countries really supported for a Jewish homeland. So eventually, the UN had a resolution passed granting Jewish people a stay in historical Palestine, but that also meant that was also a big compromise for Palestinians as lots of their land was going to be taken away. But eventually, in 1948, British soldiers withdrew from the Palestinian mandate, and the Zionist army came in instead and seized the land that they were promised. And the state of Israel was established, and the Palestinian territories were taken. And this also sparked the beginning of the first Arab-Israeli war. And this war is known to Israel as their War of Independence, while for Palestinians and really lots of Arabs, it is known as the Nakba. And the Nakba, directly translated from Arabic, means catastrophe because millions of Palestinians were displaced, killed, massacred, fired, and many Palestinian villages were just demolished and destroyed. And eventually, in 1967, there was the Second Arab-Israeli War, where Jordan, Egypt, and Syria fought against Israel, but Israel prevailed and also took the rest of what is historical Palestine, which was the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And till today, they remain occupied by Israel. Uh, and regarding the three main human rights issues that I could categorize for Israel, there's the first one is the detention and detaining of children by the Israeli military, and these children are usually non-violent Palestinian protesters who advocate against the illegal Israeli settlements, which I'll get to in a second. But this really important report by UNICEF states it all. Over the past 10 years, at least, there have been 700 Palestinian children arrested, interrogated, and detained by Israeli army, police, and security agents per year. So that's about 2 children each day. And therefore, that's just a really big human rights violation. And the second is a lack of freedom of movement. Many Palestinians face barriers such as a checkpoint, a fence, or maybe even a wall when they want to go to places such as school or work, or maybe they want to travel abroad. So this barrier is basically like just restriction of movement, and it can also happen when a person would like to travel from city to city within the Palestinian territory. So that would mean, for example, traveling from Ramallah to East Jerusalem to Bethlehem to Nablus. So all these cities, you're gonna find checkpoints. You're gonna find barrier when you want to travel to. And the third uh, human rights violation is the demolition of homes and the establishment of these illegal Israeli settlements that I mentioned earlier. So currently, about 560 there are about 560,000 settlers living in these unlawful settlements in the West Bank and Jerusalem, and these settlers are Israelis provided with with education, housing, healthcare, electricity and water and such. So they're provided with a great life, but that comes at a price, which is the demolishing of these Palestinian homes, where settlements are built instead. And so the essentially the military comes in and they demolish these homes. They displace Palestinian families and they build these settlements instead. And they're internationally recognized as illegal, but no action by Israel has been done. And actually, they just increase the construction of them. So now, regarding current news, there are lots of these news are just evident on how uh, Israel treats Palestinians and the Palestinian territories, and it's also about how international figures or communities or organizations are recognizing and acknowledging these atrocities and violations being committed by Israel. And all these reports, for example, this one I'll get to in a second, but all these reports are besides the nearly daily reports of the detaining, injuring, or killing of a Palestinian, when a situation could have been handled otherwise. So, despite those nearly daily reports and rumors, or simply you hear about them all the time, but for example, you have over here the UNHRC condemning Israel's settlement building, and a very interesting other report is Israel banning Amnesty International employee from entering the West Bank, and so this is one of their pictures and trying to cover up some of their violations, but uh, yeah. And now, regarding some of these images of the atrocities, you start off over here. You see this little girl who unfortunately had her house demolished by Israeli authorities, and here is an Israeli strike on the Gaza Strip, where they claim they hit Hamas targets, but they end up also affecting these Palestinian neighborhoods and innocent families and Palestinian buildings. And consequences of these strikes are unfortunate deaths like this one of a child, or the injuring of a child like here, or the demolishing of a house, leaving a family in very unfortunate situations. Uh, and also, this is an image depicting the lack of freedom of movement. For example, over here, these Palestinian Muslim worshippers were hoping to go to Al Aqsa Mosque that day to pray, but instead were barred by the Israeli police and not allowed to pass through. So they end up having to pray on the street instead. And here you have more consequences of such strikes, and here nonviolent protests showing solidarity with Palestinians. And this is an example of an illegal Israeli settlement in the West Bank. Now, regarding NGOs, first one I want to mention is Adallah, whose aim is to promote the human rights of the Palestinian minority in Israel. And these Palestinians are treated as second-class citizens and uh, don't are not granted the full rights of a normal Israeli citizen. And the Arab Association for Human Rights works to promote such rights also for the Palestinian Arab minority in Israel. But this other third NGO, the AM Katan Foundation, aims for something else, slightly different, which is to promote and help education and just sort of resources for children, teachers, and young artists in Palestine who are restricted by the Israeli occupation. Unfortunately, something bad for all three that all three of these NGOs and others have to face is that their end goal is not reached, which is helping these Palestinians, because Israelis might not allow these funds to reach their target people in the end of the day, which is unfortunate. So now, summing it all up, if I wanted to evaluate Israel solely on its territories, the Israeli territories, it would certainly rank high. But since it fails to maintain and be consistent with the human rights situation on the Palestinian territories it holds authority over, that is why it has this awful letter D grade. And Israel has violated around 16 articles of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, uh, which are as such 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And Israel is still seen as an exploitive, foreign, and occupying state. That is all I have for Israel, and thank you very much.